This is Jocko Podcast number 26 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Oh, for a voice like thunder and a tongue to drown the throat of war. When the senses are shaken and the soul is driven to madness, who can stand? When the souls of the oppressed fight in the troubled air that rages, who can stand? When the whirlwind of fury comes from the throne of God, when the frowns of his countenance drive the nations together, who can stand? When sin claps his broad wings over the battle and sails rejoicing in the flood of death, when souls are torn to everlasting fire and fiends of hell rejoice upon the slain, oh, who can stand? Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
That right there is a little excerpt of a poem by a guy named William Blake. And it paints war as something so powerful, so evil, something superhuman. And the full poem is really a statement against war as it goes on. And it's not that much longer, but it blames war on the politicians and on the kings and on the nobles. And it blames war on the religious leaders. But he asks that question over and over again: who can stand? And I can actually answer that question. And I've seen who can stand. I've seen people break, but I have seen many brave men and women on the battlefield stand. Stand against fear and death and stand against evil. Stand as sin claps his broad wings over the battle and sails rejoicing in the flood of death. And that's William Blake. Those are his words, but he's writing that in the late 1700s and early 1800s. He had no idea how bad war would get. And I'm not saying war is worse in terms of individual horror, but in terms of scale, it can't be denied. I mean, World War I and World War II, the scale of horror, it would be incomprehensible to a man from Blake's time. He just couldn't understand it. So let's go to June 6th. 1944. As the demon spread his wings over the beaches of Normandy, and men stood against his evil. The English coxswain tried to drop the ramp a couple of 100 feet from the shore when the sergeant ordered, "Take us all the way in." Just then, machine guns opened up and bullets tore through the wooden sides of the landing craft, wounding 4 or 5 men. Men began screaming, "Open the damn doors!" Just as the ramp went down, there was a pause in the incoming fire. We exited fast, diving into the water and holding on. Sergeant Trona was lying next to me when he was shot through the wrist. I crawled over to him and gave him first aid. We just let the tide wash over the lower portion of our bodies, using our fingernails to pull forward, inch by inch, to keep from drowning. I looked back at our assault craft, and both English sailors were dead. They were heroes and paid the price for getting us in. They risked their safety to get us closer to shore. Private Thomas McCarter was the first fatality in our sector. His cries to me for help still haunt me. Weighted down and possibly wounded, he frantically struggled in the water as he cried my name, but I couldn't get to him. It was drilled into us that we must push forward to the objective and to let the medics take care of the wounded. We were subjected to grazing fire from crisscrossing fire from machine guns. I believed at the time that it would be better for me to push forward since Tom was quite far away. These machine guns kept firing until we got to the seawall. Tom was my friend, and I should have tried to save him. It took individual riflemen using grenades, satchel charges, and bayonets to neutralize the almost impregnable concrete bunkers. I didn't see any Rangers until later. In my opinion, the Air Force and Navy made it possible for us to hang on until reinforcements and more equipment arrived. They also kept the Germans from mounting an armored counterattack. But, it boils down to the bloody foot soldier and his rifle to hold on to the real estate. And that right there was Private First Class Randolph A. Ginman, Company D, 116th Infantry. 27 years old on D-Day, a mortar gunner. Now we're going to hear from Private First Class George A. Kobe, Company D, 116th Infantry. 600 yards from the shore, the English coxswain lost his nerve and slowed the engine. This improved the Germans' opportunity to hit our boat. Captain Schilling was looking through the vision slit, looked back at the sailor and said, "You're not going to drop that ramp here." Technical Sergeant Stinnett was standing next to the captain. Suddenly, an 88 millimeter hit the ramp directly, blowing Captain Schilling backward, killing him instantly. Part of the ramp caught Stinnett's left eye, knocking it out. With John Sefco, Vic Cremone, and Eugene Adrian, we finally made it to the seawall. How, I'll never know. It was the worst fire I was ever subjected to in all of my combat. Now we've got Private First Class Robert L. Sales, Company B, 116th Infantry. Joined the Virginia National Guard at age 15. About 100 yards from the shore, the English coxswain said he couldn't get us any closer. As the ramp lowered, enemy machine guns opened up, firing directly into our boat. Like all great leaders, Captain Zapp was the first off the boat and the first one to get hit. Staff Sergeant Dick Wright was second and also hit, falling into the water. A medic was third, and I didn't see what happened to him. I was fourth. I caught my heel in the ramp and fell sideways out of the path of that MG-42, undoubtedly saving my life. All of the men that followed were either killed by Germans or drowned. No one from my craft was ever found alive. The captain screamed, "I'm hit." I tried to get to him, but he was lost in the surf. Men were all around me, in the water, bleeding from wounds and screaming for help. I knew the boat was the target, so I got away from it as fast as I could. One of the first things I did was shed my SCR-300 radio and my assault jacket. That radio was heavy, and I suppose it is still at the bottom of the channel. Mortar and artillery shells were landing all around, and one hit so close that it knocked me groggy. Luckily, a log floated by, with an unexploded teller mine still attached. I grabbed hold of it until my head cleared a bit. I remained behind that log, pushing it in front of me, using it as a shield until I reached dry land. The first person I saw on the beach that I recognized was Dick Wright. He hollered over to me that he was badly hit. I watched him trying to raise his arms, but a sniper spotted him and shot him through the head. His face fell into the sand, never to move again. I didn't try to go to him because I knew he was dead. While pinned down on that beach, I watched incoming landing craft being shot at. One of them carried the battalion surgeon, Captain Robert B. Ware, a man I knew from my hometown of Madison Heights, Virginia. The doctor had flaming red hair. I watched him as he disembarked the landing craft, and that machine gun opened up, cutting him down. What I will never forget was seeing his helmet fly off his head and showing all that red hair. I crawled on my belly using the dead and wounded as a shield. Sometime later, I saw Max Smith from Shepherdtown, West Virginia, and some other B Company men taking shelter behind a seawall. Some of them were badly wounded. I bandaged Smith's eye that was lying out of his face. I kept crawling back to the water's edge, dragging men out if they were still living. I didn't bother if they were dead. I pulled quite a few to safety. One of the medics helped to give first aid and comfort to the wounded. The first enemy soldier I saw was a prisoner. Interrogators had him on his knees, and his hands were locked behind his head. He didn't look so tough to me, but those guys up on the cliffs were plenty tough. You can't imagine how helpless it was to be lying on that beach and those machine guns and snipers shooting anything that moved. At this point, we were not sure the invasion would succeed. Our company was shot up so badly that there was no organization or communication from other sectors to tell us how they were doing. If all the landing zones were as helpless as we were, the invasion was in jeopardy. We felt helpless and alone. We had many acts of heroism from B Company men, with many of them unreported. Lieutenant William B. Williams single-handedly, with hand grenades and a rifle, charged and subdued a pillbox. Sergeant William Pierce and Odell Paget survived the landing better than we did and were able to take a few men up to those rocks and cliffs and fight it out with the Germans. It was touch and go for quite some time in our sector. Not until St. Lo fell in July did we know for sure that the invasion was a success. D-Day was indeed the longest day, but there were many, many long days after that. Day after bloody day, it was jumping over those hedgerows and men getting killed. We lost some very good men every single day. St. Lo was about 25 miles from the beach, and it was liberated on July 18th. When St. Lo fell, we felt confident that we were in France to stay. Surviving the war was another story. So those were some excerpts right there from a book by John Robert Slaughter. The book is called Omaha Beach and Beyond, The Long March of Sergeant Bob Slaughter. And those excerpts that I just read, they weren't Bob Slaughter. They were various other people that worked with him that he went back and interviewed. This is another guy, born in Tennessee, grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, enlisted in the Army Reserves at age 15. And as he's given an intro to the book here, this is what he says. I remember buddies with whom I spent passes to London, men I played cards with a couple of days before the landing, who signed their autographs on my Eisenhower D-Day missive, who shook hands with me on the Javelin's deck. Young men, as I was, all killed during the largest air, land, and sea battle ever fought. Many more were maimed and never seen again. How could I forget this epic event, even if I failed to recall the proper names and faces? Memoirs are not history, but history is someone's recorded memory. Most of us remember noble and heroic deeds, but conveniently forget or fail to record the less than noble. I am no different. Many times I did and saw things that are best forgotten or left unwritten. War brings out the best and the worst in most of us. The Nazis were accused of killing, raping, pillaging, and burning. A few on our side were also guilty of these crimes. Soldiers on both sides looted for souvenirs, as did I. And yet, cruel treatment of the enemy was an unusual occurrence. I myself am proud to say that I once saved an enemy soldier's life. This book will attempt to show that ordinary men and women can do extraordinary feats if they believe the cause is great. Many GIs have said that they were merely fighting for each other. True, but I maintain another factor played a more important role, and it can be summed up with one word: pride. Regardless of their motives, I saw very few cowards in the 116th Infantry Regiment. May God bless the many, many more heroes. Yeah, this is one of those books where don't have a lot to add in some of these situations. Mm-hmm. Now, Bob Slaughter was his nickname, Bob Slaughter. And when he got to England, they actually took him and a bunch of other soldiers and they formed him into a new unit called the 29th Rangers. And they trained these guys ultra hard. They did all kinds of stuff for 11 months getting ready for the invasion. These 29th Rangers, they did marching and mountain climbing and a crazy obstacle course. They trained in unarmed combat. They did log PT, cold weather training. I mean, just grueling training. And at the end of all that harsh training, for a number of reasons, they actually disbanded this group and they sent them all back with their regular units. So they had a group of guys that got trained super hard, like what we would consider a modern sort of special operations selection course. They went through that, but then when they got done with this training and they were getting ready for the actual invasion, they took them, dispersed them amongst the regular troops. And the guy that ran this training for the 29th Rangers was a guy named Major Milholland. And he sent a letter to his daughter, and this is what he wrote. This is after these guys got disbanded. He said, "Every boy should be made to play football and box and participate in all kinds of athletics. And above all, the American should be taught discipline and decent living. Then he should be given a year of the toughest kind of military training. Not the kind that we know, but the kind I gave my Rangers. God, I wish I had those boys now. We would tear the Germans stringy. I hear of those boys now and then, and although they are almost all gone now, they have done unbelievable things and are spoken of almost in a tone of reverence by officers and men alike who have fought with them. They were men. Train. And train hard. And learn about discipline. You parents out there, get your kids training, sports, decent living. That's how you make men." Now, fast forwarding, because they went back to their regular army units, and they continue to train and prepare for the invasion. And Bob Slaughter is assigned to D Company, 116th Infantry, 29th Infantry Division. And I'm fast forwarding right now straight to D-Day, straight to his perception of D-Day and what it was like for him. You know, this is all that training that these guys have been through, and none of them had been to combat before. So this is it. Their first operation is D-Day. And this is what it's like. Back to the book. About 150 yards from the shore, despite the warning from someone behind me to keep your head down, I cautiously peeped up. I could see that the craft about 25 yards to our right and a couple of 100 yards ahead were targeted by small arms. Fiery tracer bullets skipped and bounced off the ramp and sides as they zeroed in before the ramps fell. I said to anyone close enough to hear above the bedlam, "Men, we are going to catch hell. Be ready." Then it began to happen. Enemy artillery and mortar shells sent great plumes of water spouting skyward as they exploded in the water. Near misses rained us with seawater. I suddenly became very worried about what Jerry would do to us. How in the hell did those sons of bitches survive what we thought was a carpet bombing and unshelling of the beach? At Slapton Sands, we trained with live explosions, but these were far more frightening. This time, they were shooting to kill every one of us. The craft slowed as we scraped a submerged sandbar, which kept us from a dry landing. Everyone wanted to get the hell off that rocking boat, but the coxswain had trouble dropping the steel ramp. When it finally slammed and splashed down, the front of the boat began to buck like a wild stallion, raising 6 or 7 feet, turning slightly sideways, and then slamming down again. The first man went to exit off about mid-ramp. The craft surged forward and crushed the poor fellow to death. So I jumped off and moved away from the crazy, erratic landing craft. Luckily, I didn't see anyone else get hit by the ramp. I was now struggling in water up to my armpits. Luckily for me, at 6'5", most of the time my head was above water. Later, as I crossed the beach, my height would be a detriment, making me a larger target. Meanwhile, as I tried to get to shore, shorter men grabbed my clothing to keep their heads above water. Suddenly, as fear replaced seasickness, I was no longer cold. Most of all, I feared I would drown after being shot. Snipers hiding in the bluffs hit quite a few men, but most of the damage came from rapid-firing automatic weapons. In every war since gunpowder was invented, soldiers have experienced the dreaded feeling of being under live enemy fire for the first time. It was demoralizing to hear good men scream as bullets ripped into soft flesh, and others scream as the fierce flooding tide dragged the non-swimmers under. I remember helping Private Ernest McCandless, who was struggling to get closer in. He still had one of the precious boxes of .30 caliber machine gun ammo. I remember him shouting to me, "Slaughter, are we going to get through all of this?" I didn't know how to answer him, so I didn't say anything. To tell the truth, I thought we were all going to die. A body with its life preserver inflated floated by. The face had already turned a dark purple. At first, I thought it was Private Richard Gomez, who had a dark complexion, but I later found out that Gomez had survived the day. The fellow I saw was just one of thousands who died. There was no way to be sure if I had known him. Many of our company were hit in the water and drowned, good swimmers or not. I came ashore, surrounded by the screams of men who had been hit and were drowning under their ponderous loads. All around me, dead men floated in the water, along with live men who acted as if they were dead. The Germans couldn't tell which was which. The flooding tide washed everyone in. Lying at the edge of the high water mark, I watched a GI trying to cross the beach. He had a hard time running. I believe he was from the craft to our right. An enemy gunner cut him down, and he staggered and fell to the sand. I can still hear the screaming. A well-marked medical corpsman moved quickly to help him. He was also shot. I'll never forget seeing that medic lying next to that dying soldier, both screaming for help. Within minutes, as I watched, both men fell silent and, mercifully, died. I saw men vomit at the sickening sights and others cry openly and unashamedly. All of us had to find it within ourselves to get across that sandy no man's land. This is where the Army's strict discipline and rigorous training took over. Individual pride had a lot to do with it too. What an unbelievable first combat experience for these guys. And I want you to think about that image of you're in a boat, you're a couple hundred meters offshore, maybe 200 or 300 meters offshore, and you're looking 200 meters ahead of you, and you're starting to see tracers impact on this boat that you know you're next. Mm-hmm. You know you're next. There's no turning back. There's the only thing you can do. There's nothing's going to stop it.
Mm-hmm. Did you saw Saving Private Ryan, right?
Yes.
That movie?
Yes.
So, I mean, to me, they did a good job in capturing that moment where everyone's like, it's like real tense and you can slowly start to hear the boom, boom, boom. And the way it kind of builds and how chaotic it gets, man, it's like the most, especially at that time, it was one of the most real feeling movies, involving war. That
they did an outstanding job. Man, they did an outstanding job in that opening scene.
It's just so crazy, like to hear the real account.
Right.
And then kind of compare it. And, when you watch the movie, you're like, dang, that's crazy. That's because you're kind of involved in the movie. Mm-hmm. But when you think more and you're like, dang, this really happened. This is what really happened.
Yeah. And also, I mean, obviously the actors do a good job of portraying what's going on in their minds. Mm. But this is what was going on in his mind. This is what he was thinking and seeing.
They, Steven Spielberg put those guys through these harsh conditions during the, so they'd kind of...
Some little Hollywood boot camp.
Yeah. But even while they were filming it, to kind of help capture. I mean, obviously, it's you can't compare it to the real deal.
They did an outstanding job. They really did. And the first time I saw that scene, I was impacted. You know? I was definitely impacted.
Yeah, man.
And I remember I wasn't with my guys in Ramadi. They were on and off. They were in a really hellacious situation, and they were in a Bradley fighting vehicle. Mm-hmm. And as they were going on to target, they were hearing rounds hit the outside of the Bradley as the ramp was about to go down.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I can't remember this 100%, but I'm pretty sure that the young officer in that vehicle, I remember him telling me about, he was like, damn. But he said he was screaming, don't put the ramp down. Mm-hmm. Like, just leave it up. We're getting shot at. And they couldn't hear him, so they just put the ramp down anyways. And so then what do? You just go.
Yep.
Yeah. So, back to the book. After I fired my M1, it jammed. To clean it, I slipped out of my assault jacket and spread my raincoat, only to discover bullet holes in my pack and coat. Suddenly overwhelmed with fear, I became weak in the knees. My hands shook as I tried to wipe sand from my weapon. I had to catch my breath and compose myself. By mid-morning, We had worked our way to the base of the hill. Men from other units began to gather. The regimental commander, Colonel Charles D.W. Canham, appeared from down beach with his right arm in a sling and clutching a Colt 45 semi-automatic pistol in his bony left hand. Canham didn't look like a soldier, but he sure as hell was one. He was tall and thin, wore wire-rimmed glasses, and had a pencil-thin mustache. He yelled for the officers and non-coms to help him get the men across the beach and up the hill. Get these men the hell off this goddamn beach and go kill some goddamn krauts. In a nearby pillbox, a lieutenant colonel taking refuge from the enemy mortar barrage yelled out to Canham, "Colonel, you better take cover or you're going to get killed." Colonel Canham screamed his reply, "Get your ass out of there and help me get these men off this beach." The officer did what Canham ordered. So now we got somebody leading, a serious leader. And in the book, Slaughter put the memorandum from Canham that Canham wrote to the troops prior to D-Day. So I'm going to read that. 29 May 1944, memorandum. To the members of CT 116 reinforced, to be read by commanders to all personnel prior to embarkation. 1. The long-awaited day is near, and prior to embarkation, I want to wish each of you the best of luck in your forthcoming adventure. There is one certain way to get the enemy out of action, and that is to kill him. War is not child's play and requires hatred for the enemy. At this time, we don't have it. I hope you get it when you see your friends wounded and killed. 2. Learn to take care of yourself from the start. Remember, the Hun is a crafty, intelligent fighter and will not have mercy on you. Don't have it on him. He will try to outwit you. Be on the alert. 3. Fighting a war is the same as any athletic event, only war is for keeps. It is you or the enemy. Teamwork is the essence of success. We have the tools, the best in the world, and it is up to you to see that they are used properly. 4. Remember, when you run into the enemy, contain him with the minimum to stop him, then move around him and strike him in the flank or the rear. In all your contacts with him, be ruthless. Always drive hard. The Hun doesn't like Yankee drive and guts. Show him that you have plenty. If you close with him, use your bayonet. Show him you can take it and dish it out. Don't be caught napping. Don't let your Yankee curiosity get you blown up by a booby trap or a mine. 5. Take care of your arms and equipment. Conserve your ammunition. Make every shot count. Keep your weapons cleaned and oiled. Their proper functioning at the right time may mean your life. Every soldier must realize the importance of supply discipline and see that he himself does his part in conserving supplies. More than one battle has been lost because munitions and other supplies were not available. 6. Do not eat your K and D rations prior to D-Day, D+1 day. You won't get any more until D+2. 7. The Navy and Air will give us plenty of support. General Montgomery was very optimistic in his talk to the officers yesterday. At this time, no one knows how much resistance we will meet on D-Day. We may be able to walk in without trouble. We may have to fight for your life. To meet the worst and make up your minds now that you're going forward regardless, and it is a one-way ticket. We are not giving any ground at any time, and we are not leaving until the job is done. To each one of you, happy landings, and come off those craft, fight like hell. can them. Lays it out. Definitely lays it out. I think those guys couldn't have heard any better information. Keep clean, keep discipline, be ready. Flank the enemy. Always hear that, flank the enemy.
Yep.
So now these guys are in kind of in a holding position. They've kind of secured some chunks of the beach and a little bit of the high ground. And now going back to the book, we began to think about defending against the expected counterattack that we were told would take place in less than 24 hours. To bolster our defenses, we took turns making special trips back to the still dangerous beach in order to find more automatic weapons, ammo, and supplies. When it was my turn to go down, I was horrified at what I saw. The debris-strewn beach was a disaster area. The incoming flooding tide brought with it the bodies of hundreds of our proud regiment. Scores of our men with blood-stained shirts rolled in the surf among helmets, assault jackets, gas masks, and M1 rifles. At the edge of the water, I saw a burning landing craft that had been trying to deposit a Sherman tank down its ramp. The tank was also burning and abandoned. From our perspective, the battle looked hopeless. You know, that's something that he said that a couple times. He didn't think they were going to win. Mm-hmm. You know, despite what Canham said, hey, we're not going to give up any ground. Well, guess what? I don't know if we're going to be able to hold this ground. We might all die here. Mm-hmm. And yet all these men pressed on. Here's a little look at the German attitude right here. I saw a regimental intelligence officer armed with a carbine interrogating a German prisoner. The prisoner was on his knees with his hands behind his head. He was rather small and frail looking. I was surprised to see he was not wearing the usual square-shaped battle helmet. Instead, he wore a gray-billed cap. The lieutenant asked the prisoner, among other things, where the minefields were. The soldier answered only with the accepted Geneva Convention requirement of name, rank, and serial number. We had been instructed not to take prisoners for the first 2 or 3 days, so I expected the officer to eventually shoot the prisoner. Again, the interrogator screamed, "Where are the damn minefields?" Again, he received the same reply, name, rank, and serial number. The lieutenant's carbine barked, but the bullet was aimed at the ground between the prisoner's knees. The arrogant German looked straight at the officer and said with a smirk, "Nicht hier." Not here. He pointed between his knees. Here. He pointed to his head. This told me something about our adversary. So you had, I mean, we know that people will fight to the death. We know that they get brainwashed. I mean, when you look at any history, this sounds like a young kid probably raised from the very young age as a Nazi, as a loyal Nazi, just like the Japanese that fought to the death. That's what we have here in many cases. Back to the book. Combat deaths are ugly and sickening. A bullet or piece of red-hot shrapnel tears flesh, gristle, and bone into gruesome wounds. A few hours in the sun causes a body to swell grotesquely and turn dark purple. The stench is unbearable. Such deaths were tragic insults to all those handsome young GIs just beginning their lives who would not fulfill their dreams. Many of those killed were, like me, barely teenagers when they enlisted, just starting to grow to maturity in the Army. Those comrades and I spent many happy weekends and furloughs together, soaking up culture and drinking bitters. We shared living quarters, read each other's mail, and more significantly, shared the misery of training in the most extreme of elements. The 116th Infantry lost from 800 to 1,000 men on D-Day, and D Company lost at least 72. Of the dead, 20 of them were from my hometown of Roanoke. 5 of 9 of our officers were killed, including Captain Walter Schilling, Lieutenant William Gardner, Lieutenant Merle Cummings, Lieutenant Vincent Labowitz, and Lieutenant Alton Ashley. There were 12 non-coms killed, including these Roanokers: Sergeant James Obenshane, Staff Sergeant James L. Wright, Sergeant Russell Jack Ingram, and Sergeant George D. Johnson, Corporal Jack Sims. Add to the list of the dead 23 privates. And another 32 wounded, many of them severely. And yet our nightmare had just begun. Brutal. Absolutely brutal. And I wanted to rattle off those names of all those people from the hometown. Mm-hmm. You know, when we see a soldier or a Marine or a sailor get killed now, I mean, you see what it does to a town. You see how it impacts a town. Imagine 20 from one little hometown. They move past the initial D-Day, and now they start to head to St. Lo. And this is where you've heard about before, if you know anything about history, you know anything about this part of the war, this is when they get into hedgerow country. And they're fighting from hedgerow to hedgerow. And these hedgerows are, you know, these ancient, I guess they're not structures, they're hedges, but they're completely difficult to get through. You have to cut through them or drive through them with tanks or whatever, and they hold up. And every one of these hedgerows becomes like a mini battle. And they're brutal battles. Back to the book. The sight of another terrible death that occurred at this time haunts my dreams to this day. My squad and I were digging a machine gun emplacement behind a scrubby hedgerow. We had just finished fixing the camouflage when I happened to see a junior officer with field glasses scanning the front. I could tell he was a newly arrived replacement. His uniform and equipment were relatively new and unworn. The sharp report of an 88 millimeter fired from somewhere nearby and sent me diving. At the same time, the high explosive missile hit the lieutenant's upper torso. The second squad and I were splattered with gore as the spotter was blown backward, minus his head. Number 2 gunner, Private First Class Sal Argery, vomited. And I nearly did too. The dreaded German sniper was almost as highly respected as the 88. Sharper shooters gave no warning, taking careful aim with sniper-scoped Mausers. The receiving end would hear the sharp crack and instantaneous whine of the bullet. If you heard the report of the bullet leaving the muzzle, it wasn't for you. German snipers nearly always aimed for the head if it was visible and in range. Most infantrymen never removed their helmets except when they shaved, and I confess that I slept in mine. The 8 millimeter bullet could easily pass through the helmet, through the head, and out the other side with enough energy left to do more damage. I saw men get hit between the eyes or just above the ears, which killed them instantly. If the bullet missed the helmet, the entry hole was usually neat and showed only a small trickle of blood. But after the steel jacket bullet hit the helmet or the skull, the bullet flattened, causing the wound to shatter the other side of the head away. They start receiving more fire. He jumps for cover. And then back to the book. I climbed back on the path, shaken but unscathed. Within minutes, I had another surprise. As I approached an opening on the right side of the hedgerow, I heard someone moaning. Crawling carefully through the opening, I came face to face with a young German paratrooper who had been hit by a large chunk of shrapnel. He had a very serious upper thigh wound, and his left trouser leg was bloody and torn. This was my first encounter with the enemy up close. The German paratrooper is a fierce and fanatical warrior, easily distinguishable by his round helmet and baggy smock. My first reaction was to put him out of his misery and keep going. I believe he knew what I was thinking. He begged tearfully, "Comrade, bitte," which means friend, please. He was an impressive-looking young soldier, about 19 years old, my age. He was as filthy as I was, with long, brown, stringy hair. I'd always thought most German soldiers had short, blonde hair. He had an athletic build, about 5 feet 10 inches tall, about 180 pounds, and a handsome face. I suspended the promise I had made at the beach about not taking any prisoners. I thought that was then, and this is now. I just couldn't shoot a wounded human being at point-blank range. I made sure he didn't have a weapon hidden on him. Then I tied his belt around his upper thigh, which stopped the blood from gushing. I gently swabbed the dirt from his wound and applied sulfa powder. His wince turned to a forced grin. He was in pain, so I gave him a shot of morphine and a drink of water from my canteen. Then I let him have one of my Lucky Strike cigarettes and lit it for him. As I left, he smiled weakly and said in guttural, broken English, "Danke. God bless. Good luck." That changed my thinking about taking prisoners. I still hated the enemy, but I couldn't kill one at close range, especially if his hands were up. I sent one of our medics to finish what I had started. I hoped the German would recover, and that his war was over. That's a compassionate human being right there.
Yeah, doesn't it kind of, in a way, put it into perspective, but more shed light on potentially the overall attitude where you're fighting a war and the enemy is more this entity of an enemy. You know, it's not like, I'm going to kick this guy's. I mean, I'm sure it's like that sometimes.
It's not personal. Yes.
Yeah.
And the U.S. and the military, and we still do this, they're going to dehumanize the enemy as much as they can to make it easier for you to kill them.
Yes.
That's why you call them krauts. That's why you call them dinks. That's why you call them whatever the slang, you know, which would now all be considered racial terms or politically incorrect terms. There's a reason. They're trying to dehumanize these other people. They're trying to dehumanize the enemy so that you can more easily kill them. And when you come face to face with them, all of a sudden they become human.
Yeah, isn't that crazy though? Like this whole crazy thing, is probably the craziest thing imaginable for this guy. He comes face to face with a guy that you know, kind of in between the bullets, so to speak.
Right.
And he's face to face with this person, and then really what the whole experience was reduced to in that moment is just one person helping another person, you know? And then and it impacted both of them, obviously, you know, where the guy was like, "Hey, God bless," almost like, "Hey, man, we're in this war. I dig it." Almost like a football game or something. Yeah. Like, "Hey, man, I dig it. You know, we're on different teams. Hey, good luck." He told him good luck in a war. So, man, that whole human factor when you're exposed to it, even with the enemy, dang, that's got to be strong, huh?
Yeah, definitely can be. I mean, in World War I, there was times where, and this is really famous, there was times where they got out of the trenches and played soccer on Christmas Day against each other.
Oh, yeah.
And then the next day go back to slaughtering each other.
You know how crazy that must feel in this weird way? That must feel so good, you know, to be like, like, like you ever gotten, like when you're a kid or even as an adult, when you get in like an argument with someone real bad, maybe your friend or not, whatever, you get a real bad argument with them. And I don't know, it lasts a day or two or a week. I don't know, whatever. It's real bad. And at the end, you guys make up and you guys are like back friends again. It's almost like, man, it's such a good feeling. Maybe because of the contrast or I don't know, maybe because, I don't know. But it's like, it has to have like that kind of feeling when you're in this crazy war. You're like, I hate this, so much hatred and just aggression and opposition.
And also you got to remember, there's plenty of guys and there's plenty of Germans that got smoked right there without a second thought.
Yeah.
And he just had that moment. And maybe if that guy would have looked a little bit different or acted a little bit differently.
Or something happened more quick, like faster or something, it just slowed down just for that second and sucked them both right in.
Who knows what happened later. The next people that came, the medic might have gone over and said, wait, you sent me over here to work on a German?
Yeah.
That could have happened too. You just never know.
Dang.
Now, we're going to start getting crushed with some artillery. Back to the book. Jerry pounded the 116th all day and 2 nights with blockbuster 155 millimeter and 105 millimeter artillery. Near misses caused enough concussion to make our ears ring and our heads ache. The pounding rounds of salvo after salvo of earth-shaking artillery were relentless and frightening. During the bombardment, I shared a long, shallow slit trench with one of my first D Company replacements, Private Lewis Cass, from Chevy Chase, Maryland. We nicknamed him Junior early on because of his boyish looks and demeanor. Junior was from an affluent family and had volunteered into the Army upon graduation from high school. He didn't look like the type that could last very long in brutal combat. Our slit trench was covered with wooden sheathing and topped with a roof of piled dirt. Like thousands of other infantry soldiers subjected to such heavy bombardment, Junior and I were a pitiful sight. Fine yellow dust sifted through the cracks and the roof and stuck to our sweaty skin and eyes. If the dust had been black, we would have looked like very tired coal miners. The yellow dust turned to mud around our swollen, bloodshot eyes. When nature called, we had to answer in the safety of our slit trench, lying down. All the training and experience in the world could not have prepared us for this kind of harassment. Those boxcar-sized shells sounded like they were flip-flopping end over end and screeching straight for our hole. This went on hour after hour, all day and through the night. Many good soldiers cracked, and who could blame them? The long bouts of duty had been taking their toll. It was extremely rare for an infantryman to go unscathed for very long. Many 29ers were wounded 2, 3, or 4 times fighting through the hedgerows of Normandy. All of us were praying for the $1 million wound, which missed vital organs, bone, and nerves, but would give us a long stay in an English hospital, sleeping under clean white sheets, and, at least in fantasy, in the care of a beautiful nurse. Meanwhile, battle fatigue and self-inflicted wounds had become serious problems. At least once, nearly all combat soldiers, if they are honest, consider shooting themselves in order to get out of the hell of battle. Self-inflicted wounds, however, are considered disgraceful and, if proven, in a court-martial offense. Nevertheless, many respectable KIA and wounded in action were, in reality, self-inflicted or friendly fire accidents. So we have some massive stress. Stress that's driving men to shoot themselves.
Yeah, and another mention of the $1 million wound.
Yes.
The ticket out,
And he's saying at least once, nearly all combat soldiers, if they are honest, consider shooting themselves in order to get out of the hell of battle. back to the book. Landmines and booby traps were also common ways to be wounded or killed. Hearing the news of who had gotten hit was always hard, and every day new faces replaced seasoned infantrymen. It was easy to distinguish a new arrival from a veteran. The old-timer could be 18 or 19 years old, but if he had survived a week on the front, he was considered old. And we all looked it. On a diet of K rations, we all lost weight. Our ribs, shoulder blades, and Adam's apples stuck out, and our filthy, ragged uniforms hung like worn-out drapes. Our eyes were blood red and sunken, and we had bleeding sores on our exposed skin. Ordinarily, these would be telltale signs that a man needs a month's rest. But we all knew there would be no rest until St. Lo was taken. Knowing that there was no immediate end in sight drove some fellas over the edge. A few good soldiers who couldn't take the pounding day after day committed suicide. This was the case of Stanley Korsiak, a 19-year-old private born and raised in Chicago. He was a tough, athletic little soldier. He made the D-Day landings and had fought well through the hedgerows. But everyone has a breaking point. His squad reported that Stan, who had seen many of his close friends killed or severely wounded, had begun to act strangely. He cried often, especially during incoming artillery barrages, and sometimes his crying reached the point of hysteria. Instead of the usual disciplinary action for similar behavior, he was sent back to the kitchen area for a break from the action. Many of us thought that a few days' rest, a couple of hot meals, and a warm bath might rehabilitate him. But he was in more pain than any of us had realized. Why couldn't we see that he had reached his limit? Private Korsiak found a Cook's Springfield .03 rifle, removed his shoe so he could pull the trigger, and blew the top of his head off. One of the cooks heard the shot and ran to his tent. Stanley Korsiak had had enough of the constant fear, the filthy grime, the ear-shattering explosions, the putrid smells, the excruciating pain, and the maiming and deaths of his close friends. Stan Korsiak died on July 2nd. The record book shows he was killed, a non-battle casualty. In my book, Private Korsiak died an American hero. So we got to know that this demon that we're dealing with now has been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's a classic situation where his death, Stan Korsiak's death, is reported as a non-battle casualty, which means no one labeled him a suicide, which means how many people did that happen to? And it was never captured. It wasn't reported. And so now we never dealt with it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't deal with things, if you don't capture the lessons learned, if you don't recognize these things, how are you going to fix them? As Bob Slaughter pointed out, it was almost impossible for one of these guys to go day after day after day and not get wounded. And he ended up getting wounded. Got shrapnel frag in his back. Gets pulled off the battlefield, luckily, and sent to an English hospital. And here's what he says about that. It is one thing to visit a wartime army hospital, but something quite different and much worse to be a patient in one. Lawmakers would consider armed conflicts more carefully before rattling the proverbial saber if they were forced to visit an amputee, abdominal, burn, or plastic surgery ward. You hear that, lawmakers? Before you send boys off to war, you need to go and spend some time in a hospital with wounded vets. And make damn sure your decision that you're making. Back to the book. I recovered in a ward dedicated to abdominal wound patients. A bullet or a piece of metal shrapnel puncturing the stomach can cause a lifetime of embarrassment and misery. The aftermath of a gut wound is either death or eternal marriage to a colostomy sac. The stench in that ward was predictable. It was tough to share quarters with seriously wounded patients. At night, the moaning and groaning and sometimes screaming made it hard to sleep. Many of the men there died. I remember one particularly sad loss. Swarthy Tony from Brooklyn was the third-floor clown. The shift nurses fell in love with him because he kept the ward laughing with his teasing and practical jokes. But one night his cherished laughter came to an awful end. On a Saturday night with a skeleton crew on duty, Tony began to complain of a sharp pain to the gut. A floor nurse was paged, and after several tries, she arrived. By that time, Tony was screaming as two orderlies quickly wheeled him into the emergency room. 2 hours later, Tony was dead of gangrene poisoning. Facial disfigurement was terrible and more devastating to the patient than any other kind of wound. A few men had lost arms or legs, either partly or completely, and as a result, some of them became so-called basket cases. Even so, and it's sad to say, some severely maimed men were actually happy about their condition because they were going home. Their combat days were over. So the war ends, and actually Bob Slaughter does go back. He recovers from his wounds. He goes back. He's there for the Allied victory. And that's another just fantastic story of how that all happens. And then he was out of the army. And this is what that feels like. Back to the book. On July 13th, 1945, I was suddenly separated from the service, discharged at Fort Meade, Maryland, with a few dollars in my pocket and the khaki uniform on my back. I was suffering mental as well as physical wounds, but there was no one to counsel me. I was a civilian again, but I was not comfortable socializing with other civilians. I was 20 years old with an 11th grade education and no skills other than soldiering. I was left alone to find my way home to Roanoke, Virginia. There was no treatment for post-traumatic stress syndrome. It was simply called battle fatigue. Those of us who had returned from the war were left to tough it out. The years rolled by. Our hair grayed and thinned, waistlines grew, and many of our company associates developed health problems. Our generation smoked cigarettes and drank hard liquor. Many of our men who had hiked halfway around the world became sedentary. We didn't like to exercise. We traveled to the beach or went to swimming pools thinking that sunshine was good for the skin. Many were disabled by wounds, drank and smoked too much, and died prematurely. The war still took its toll long after it was over. Rarely did anyone talk about the war. The media were silent, our children uninterested, and we ourselves sought to forget. I got married, raised 2 sons, and went to work for a mid-sized newspaper in a mid-sized community. I found time to acquire a modicum of education, coached Little League Baseball, and was grateful to live a normal American life. Too many of my Army buddies failed to reach their 25th birthday, and many of those who did were never the same. After what they had been through, they just couldn't adjust to the real world. Many of them fell prey to alcohol, loose women, radical religion, or isolation. Anything to help them get through each day, month, and year. 7 of our D Company men committed suicide. Compared to those and thousands more, I have been blessed. In some ways, writing this book, a process that has taken me almost 15 years, has been the last leg of the journey. I realize that I speak for many who never had the chance to speak for themselves, and I have done my best to pay them tribute. My hope is that this memoir, in however small a way, will perpetuate their memory and stand as a witness to their sacrifices. It saddens and worries me that so much of the world, including America itself, refuses to learn the hard lessons of the past. Now that I am in my 80s, I am well aware that the long march that began so many years ago is about to come to a halt. I am proud to say that my generation helped save the world from tyranny, prevent the extinction of an entire group of people, and preserve the democratic freedoms of our wonderful American way of life. I wouldn't change a thing, except to wish that my dear Army buddies could be here too. And John Robert Bob Slaughter died on May 29th, 2012. And William Blake, the poet, you asked, who can stand? And I will tell you, it is men like Bob Slaughter that stand. And it's men like him that encourage me and tell me in no uncertain terms that we are capable of more. We can do more. We can be more. We can stand. Not much to say after that one, Echo.
No, sir.
Not much to say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't help but agree fully, and a lot of these, when we go through these books, it just, man, it's crazy how much it puts into perspective. Everyone knows about World War II. Everyone most people, we know about World War II. We know about the wars, but we don't really know about the wars. We don't know about the details that we don't know about individual experiences, which really that's what makes the wars.
Yes.
And we don't know anything about that.
And what's interesting, this book was recommended to me from Twitter, from one of the troopers out there. Dang. And so we have Band of Brothers, right? And everybody knows Band of Brothers. Not everybody, but more people know Band of Brothers. Mm-hmm. Because it was a book, and then it was a big HBO movie, and it was awesome. This book is less well known. Mm-hmm. But what you have to know is that there's thousands and thousands of stories that we don't know and we will never know. Yep. I mean, some of them we'll try to know, but there's so many stories that we will never know.
Yeah.
That moment in combat when this guy tried to save that guy and they both did something completely heroic and they both died and we never will know.
Yep.
So we have to cherish what we can find out, what we can learn. But there's just so much there and so much sacrifice that was made. And as I always say, what are we doing right now to honor that sacrifice?
Yeah.
More. That's what we need to do. More.
Agree.
And with that, let's make the hard transition once again the rough transition to the interweb for some questions.
Speaking of interwebs, Onnit.com/Jocko is where you can get 10% off of the spectacular supplements, namely krill oil and Shroom Tech.
What about Alpha Brainy?
That's good that you remembered that. You must have been on Alpha Brain.
And also, you might want to just do yourself that favor and get some of those warrior bars. What else?
If you're in the mood to support this podcast, before you shop on Amazon, click on the Amazon link on jockopodcast.com or jockostore.com. Sometimes people have been saying, hey, there's a problem with the link. Like, it's not working or whatever. Mm-hmm. Some browsers have ad block or it has ad blockers activated on it.
Got it.
So disable the ad blocker for that page and you can do it. And I'm still working on the Canada one. I don't know if we can even do the Canada one and the UK one. Anyway, click through the Jocko store or jockopodcast.com and before you do your Amazon shopping, and you can support that way, or get a shirt or a coffee mug or a bumper sticker from jockostore.com. And we weren't keeping it a secret or nothing, but we do have a new shirt out.
Oh, we do.
Know the darkness. To appreciate, you know the saying.
Well, I know that this podcast can get a little bit dark from time to time.
Yeah, because you know how like your original one of your original things was, you go through life and certain people all they see is the good things, so they get kind of desensitized to like the just small little good things in life. So when you and that's really everything anyway. Where when there's no tall people if everyone's the same size. So you kind of got to know both, both short and tall.
No, I've said it many times, and I think I originally said it on the Tim Ferriss show, and he said something along the lines of like, "Hey, Jocko, I've struggled with depression. How close should you get to the darkness?"
Right.
Because I was talking about some dark things, and I said, "Well, Tim, if you really want to know the light, then you got to know the darkness."
Right.
So exactly. Echo made a T-shirt about the darkness.
Yeah, just says know the dark. And here's the thing: I kind of added another dimension to it. It's all black. It's black on black. So you can't, so it's all dark. You can kind of see it like that. Anyway,
cool. New shirt
out if you want that one. There it is.
Let's get to some questions from the interwebs.
First question. Jocko, what is your relationship to surfing? Could you surf on active duty? And what does surfing do for you?
Okay, so my relationship with surfing. Number one, I was lucky to have a guy that, when I was a kid up in Maine, that said, "Hey, I'm going to teach you how to surf." This guy was a lifeguard. He was an outstanding surfer. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to teach you how to surf." And I was a 10-year-old kid. And I said,
ice water?
In the freezing cold water. And I said, "Yeah, awesome." And so he gave me an old surfboard and put me out there and taught me how to surf when I was 10 years old. And it definitely, surfing up in Maine is a little bit different because it's dark and it's cold, and you got to do a little bit of suffering if you want to enjoy the benefits of it. You got to know the darkness, as they say.
Anything about the darkness of surfing. On Kauai, it's not very cool.
Yeah, on Kauai, you didn't have to deal with that. So that's how I got into surfing. And surfing, a lot of people will tell you when you do it, it's somewhat addictive because it's a very kind of paradoxical thing, because it's very relaxing and at the same time it's very kind of exciting, I guess is the word. You get a little adrenaline, but you get a little mellowed out too. So it's a very fun thing to do. Good for you. It's good for your brain. It's good for the soul.
Right.
And when I was on active duty, and if you're on active duty in the SEAL teams, yeah, you can surf. And I definitely surfed. Sometimes I was more focused on surfing than others. When I really went BJJ crazy, I wasn't doing anything else with any free time other than jiu-jitsu. So but yeah, there's guys in the SEAL teams that actually manipulate their career around surfing, because you can get stationed and you can go on trips to great surf spots and all that. And there's some pretty amazing surfers in the SEAL teams, in the military as well. But I mean, I only know about guys in SEAL teams. There's a guy named Ivan Trent, whose dad was Buzzy Trent, a famous old pioneer surfer in Hawaii. And Ivan Trent, there was a picture when I first got in the SEAL teams, there was a picture of Ivan Trent dropping in on a giant wave at Waimea Bay, the famous Waimea Bay. So there's some great surfers. It's definitely a little subculture inside the teams, and you can definitely surf a lot. I mean, you're living in San Diego or Virginia Beach. I mean, Virginia Beach has waves sometimes. San Diego has waves a lot of the times. And what does it do for me? Well, one thing is it gets you outside, gets me outside, and gets you out into nature. And what I like about nature is nature makes you feel small. That's what nature, to me, that's what's good about nature. That's why nature puts things in perspective, because nature makes you feel small. Makes you realize, you know what, look at the ocean. I'm nothing. Look at the giant wilderness I'm in. I'm nothing. So it just keeps you in check and keeps you in perspective. And that's actually one of the things that probably the only thing I don't like about jiu-jitsu is pretty much the most part. It's inside. It's inside the gym on the mat.
Right.
And so, you can do it outside, but it's hard to do outside. The mats get super hot.
Yeah.
It's just 1,000 times more efficient and convenient to do inside.
It's novel outside.
It's novel, cool, exactly. It's cool to do sometimes. And at my old house, I had like a full outdoor jiu-jitsu area, which was cool. And I had a shade structure over it. It was good. But you have to have something to that extent before. It's not like you can just do jiu-jitsu outside, and you can do it. But it's novel. And if you do it in grass, you get the grass itches.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know what it is. When you do jiu-jitsu in grass, you're all itchy.
Yeah. But even that's kind of not, how like, this is more when you're younger. When you first learn jiu-jitsu.
Oh, yeah. When you first learn it, you're doing jiu-jitsu everywhere.
Friend, you're at the party, and
everything's a mat when you're a blue belt.
Yeah,
you're just looking at everything like it's a mat.
Yep.
And so I think with other people, some people, obviously you're not by the ocean, but anything outside, running, hiking, biking, swimming, even playing outdoor sports like soccer and shooting basketball outside, just whatever. Just get outside. Just get outside. Get out in the air. Feel it. And I'll tell you one more thing about jiu-jitsu and surfing. There's a little connection there. There's a little connection between jiu-jitsu and surfing. I don't know what it is.
I know what it is.
Do you know what it is? What is it?
I'll
Balance?
talk about later.
Well, you got like even Kelly Slater, who's, what is he, the 12-time champion of the world in surfing? He does jiu-jitsu. You got guys like Joel Tudor. JT. If you don't know who Joel Tudor is, he's just a legendary longboard surfer. And actually, he's from San Diego, so we kick it with JT from time to time. And actually, I see him on a regular basis at the longboard surfing contest, because both his kid and my kid surf on the longboards. But Joel Tudor, who's literally one of the most, many people consider him to be the best longboard surfer of all time.
Oh, dang.
Of all time, yeah. You didn't even know he was that good, did you?
I knew he of all time. I didn't know that, but
good.
I believe it.
And I'm not going to make that declaration because then a million people will say no, it should be this guy. But there are many people in the world who consider Joel Tudor to be the best longboard surfer of all time.
I met Joel Tudor in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
He just started coming, and Shannon was like, "Hey, roll with him. He's good at jiu-jitsu." So I was like, "Oh, cool." He was like a brown belt at the time, and I rolled, and he's really good at jiu-jitsu. And I was like, "Okay, cool, Joel." And I see him during the day. It was like mellow group, and he'd come to the day. I'd roll with Joel sometimes.
Yeah.
And be like, "Cool, Joel Tudor. He's this kind of guy who's smaller than me, we'll say, and he's better than me. Cool. One day, you know who told me Joel Tudor was a badass longboarder?
Who?
Cake Nuts.
Cake Nuts.
Hey, is that Joel Tudor in that picture right there with you and Shannon? I was like, yeah. How do you know? He goes, bro, that's a longboarder. He's so badass. That's funny.
Yeah. And not only is he so awesome at surfing, his jiu-jitsu is sick too.
Very, yes.
So Joel Tudor's one, and then once you go Brazilian in this scenario, then there's all kinds of surfing going on because that's a culture down there. You know, my first instructor Fabio Santos, he's a badass surfer. Hoyler, Hickson, even Kid Pelegro, he's so there's definitely and when you just meet guys surfing, there's like a decent chance that they train the jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And so you said you know what the connection is?
I know of some connections, yes.
Which
some major ones.
Speak.
Okay, so
educate.
Okay, so
me.
It's one of these things where kind of on the surface, it feels like you against this big wash of a challenge, right? Both of them. But really, it's not. It's not like this challenge that you take on. It's more of a challenge that you kind of just ride with, and it's more you yourself. So, and on top of it, and that could be anything. That could be mountain climbing, whatever. But this is jiu-jitsu and surfing. It always changes. It's not different. It may seem same in one way or another. It's same, but every single experience is different. Yeah, and it's not something you can just take control of. You know, it's not one of those things. Yeah. It's you have to ride the wave. Yes. And in surfing, it's literally in jiu-jitsu, it's you got to go with it. You can't fight it. Just like you can't fight a wave. You got to, and it's and they're both that. Yes. So of course, they take balance, but those are just little small physical attributes.
Right. Because other sports take balance too. A lot of
them do. Yeah. But it's you. I mean, it's kind of a spiritual type thing to say it's you against yourself. Right. But that's really what it is. It's like you have to improve yourself. It's not about conquering this, maybe psychologically it is, but it's still within yourself and it's constantly changing.
That's getting philosophical.
It's true though.
But I like it. Yeah, no, that's good. And my last comment on that was both of them, both surfing and jiu-jitsu, they empty my brain out. They empty my brain out and they give me a nice clean slate to do other things with. Yep. So that's that. All right.
For the record, it come from Kauai, but sorry to say I don't surf.
Yeah. No.
But, bruh, I used to shred bodyboarding and body surfing.
Sponger.
Yeah, total sponger. Oh, and by the way, it's Waimea, not Waimea. Oh. I'm correcting you because you're my friend. But I don't want to be a corrector.
That's correct.
Correct?
Correct.
You give me okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it could be Waimea, I guess, right? It's just pronunciation. It's spelled Waimea, but
I'm a gringo. What can I say?
Gringo. Waimea. Waimea Bay. Hawaiian. If you be a corrector too much, you become the guy that people are tolerating. So you don't want to be the guy at the party that people are tolerating.
You don't want to be that guy.
No matter how smart you want them to think you are.
Well, you just proved your intelligence.
You gave me permission.
All right.
Next question. Started jiu-jitsu this week and love it. I'm a former boxer and was thrilled that they let me spar on my first day. Is sparring on the first day too soon, in your opinion? I was repeatedly told to tone it down by the higher belts. I thought I was toning it down. Is jiu-jitsu more like a dance or a street tussle? Am I supposed to relax and let these green and blue belts destroy me? I'm confused.
This is such a great question because you see this all the time in jiu-jitsu, and I know from the podcast and from Twitter that there's so many people that are starting jiu-jitsu because of the podcast, and that's definitely why I wanted to answer this one, because this is how everybody feels when they start.
Yep.
And you're always going to get the senior belts or the more experienced people telling you, hey, man, you got to relax.
By the way, if he's rolling with green belts, that means he's rolling with people under the age of 16 years old.
Yeah, I actually had a little discussion. I've heard that there's some academies that give out green belts as an intermediate belt between white and blue.
Gotcha.
That there's adults.
Gotcha.
I have never heard of it, but I was told that the other day, so that might be the situation here.
Yep, I dig it.
And by the way, I'll just go on record as saying I disagree with it.
Yeah.
You don't have a green belt as an adult. You should be white belt and then blue belt. That's the way it was, and that's the way it should remain.
Yeah, if I were an instructor, that's how I would too. But to me, hey man, do what you dig. And he's doing jiu-jitsu, and this green belt, if in fact he's an adult, he's doing jiu-jitsu apparently long enough to get a green belt. So I say, hey,
no, he's not a green belt yet.
Right. But
you're talking about some guy.
In the event of this green belt that he's mentioned being an adult.
Okay.
Either way, I say go do it.
So yeah. Now the reason that people are telling you to relax, they're trying to be helpful, because you're going to learn more if you relax and you actually concentrate on the techniques that you've been told. The couple techniques that you've learned, try them. I'm not saying don't fight it, because you don't know what else to do. So you just use your horrible instincts to try and just muscle out of stuff, and you get beat anyways. And that's why you're just beating your head against the wall. So they're trying to get you to relax and use the technique that you learn and pay attention to what the other person's doing and think about where they're positioning their body and what they're doing and how that's working. So you can actually ask them and say, hey, when you were holding me here, I couldn't move my arm. How were you holding that? Right. So you can learn. If all you're trying to do is muscle out of it, you're not thinking about what's happening, and that's not a good sign.
Right. Yeah. I think it's funny because relax, when you hear relax as a white, I don't know if you even remember when you're a white belt, but when they say relax, more accurately put, but they're saying try to relax.
Yes.
Because we know, everyone knows, the guy's not going to relax.
Good
He's
point.
over here rolling with a guy who doesn't know anything. Of course, the guy's in mount, which is like, super uncomfortable to be in. Of course, he's going to be trying to flip out, try to get out of there. He doesn't know the moves. So he can't be like, hey, I'm going to relax and do all the moves I know. He knows 2 moves. It's his first day or whatever. So try to relax. And I think that's a good point, where don't be going so hard and spazzing out so hard that nothing's going through your mind as far as what position is this guy on me. I remember not my first day, but early on, where side control, I barely even realized the difference between a side control and a half guard situation. And that's one of the things that as time went on, I wish I would have known, okay, this is side control.
And if you would have been more aware and less fighting,
right,
you would have said, oh wait, he's got my leg trapped. That's what feels different now.
Exactly right. That's a game. You gotta switch your game to this side control game. You know?
Yep. And what's telling someone, am I supposed to let these green and blue belts destroy you? No. But you got to remember, you can't look at it like a fight.
Right.
It's not a fight.
Yeah.
It's not a fight. You know what it is? Don't let them destroy you. Let them educate you.
Right.
That's when you're rolling with a higher belt, especially when you don't know very much at all, they're educating you.
Yeah.
You should be trying to pay attention. And let's just take this off the mats and into life. Because when you get into a situation, an unknown situation, what are you going to do? Are you going to fight and struggle against when someone has more knowledge than you about some topic? Are you going to fight against them? No. Just be quiet and listen and learn. When you're in a new scenario, something you've never done before, are you going to try and compete and win at this thing you've never done before? Or are you going to try and learn and be educated? My recommendation is to learn and be educated, because you're not going to win lest it's a miracle. But most situations don't allow for miracles. So when you're in life, relax. try and learn. When you're on the mat, relax, try and learn.
Try to relax.
Try to relax. Gotta try to relax.
It's true. And I don't, maybe this is just me, but when I think of the whole spectrum when I first started versus just even right now, and of course I don't have it all figured out, but when I kind of reflect on that whole learning process, I like the fact that I couldn't really relax at the beginning because you start to realize, oh, I see how I learned that right there. Mm-hmm. I see the difference now in the time where I didn't really know how to relax versus even like the time where I thought I knew how to relax, but after, 8-10 minutes, you're like, oh, dying versus, now where you can go 10-20 hard, and find places where you can relax and be able to basically control the scenarios where you can relax. I like that. I like that at the beginning, you can't relax. That's just like true. In the beginning, you didn't know certain moves. Right. Relaxing is yet another move. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I rolled with Dean tonight, Dean Lister. And he was all fired up because he'd been on a trip. And so he's like, hey, let's roll. So sure. We rolled, and he got the mount position. And I just was down there relaxing. Speaking of relaxing, I was just down there relaxing. And I'm relaxing, but I'm just doing a little bit of off-balancing of him, so he can't really relax 100%. Mm-hmm. And it took me a few minutes. Like about 5, but I got out of the mount and got back to another position, got back to guard. So you're right. Relaxing is actually a technique in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and a big part of it, not the whole thing, but a big part of it is just being conscious of it. Maybe I'm spazzing too much or something. Of course, with everything, it's going to come with reps. It's going to come with experience and stuff like that. But yeah.
And by the way, Dean would tell you, and I would tend to agree with him, not only is relaxing a technique, spazzing is also a technique. Yeah. And sometimes, Dean will get some position on me, and I will spaz to get out of it. Now, I'm not encouraging the person that wrote this question to start working on their spaz technique. No, Don't start working on that till later. No. Save that right now. Start with your relax technique.
Yeah.
All right.
Next question. In regards to podcast number 23, in the Art of War, many of the rules seem very simplistic and black and white. Take this one, for example. When the enemy occupies high ground, do not confront him. If he attacks downhill, do not oppose him. Where does that leave us with battles like Normandy, where troops had to get up those cliffs? What about the IDF conquering the Golan Heights in the 6-Day War? There are many other examples I could give. It's obviously not ideal to do such things as fighting a well-entrenched enemy uphill, but dealing with less than ideal situations is a part of war. We should all be so lucky as to only be able to choose battles that fit the art of war. But from my experience, it's often not an option in real life. And you have to somehow get it done anyway.
So yeah, this is a pretty simple question with a pretty simple answer too. Don't forget that the laws or the art of war and the laws in the art of war, the rules, the simplistic black and white rules in the art of war are governed by other rules that say to break the rules themselves. Mm-hmm. So just to pull out a couple quotes, I went and pulled these out. Sun Tzu says, "He who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent and thereby succeed in winning may be called a heaven-born captain." So if you can adapt to the situation and adapt your tactics and modify your tactics. So attacking uphill is a modification of a tactic, right? Yes. The next one I pulled out, Sun Tzu says, "Do not repeat tactics that have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances." That answers the question in its own right. Mm-hmm. Let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. And the last little quote I pulled up from Sun Tzu, "According as circumstances are favorable, one should modify one's plans. So there's 3 rules from the art of war that tell you to change the rules of the art of war when you have to. So, you're told to avoid these situations, but sometimes you have to. Now, it's also important to remember that the philosophy of the art of war generally espouses an indirect methodology of combat, where oftentimes you're trying to keep yourself safe and inflict damage when you can. That implies that maybe I have less physical strength or size than my opponent. So I have less soldiers or less equipment than my opponent. And from that perspective, let me ask you this, would it be smart to attack Normandy if you actually didn't have the numbers to carry out the attack? And you didn't have the overwhelming force that we had amassed on England to go and assault France? It wouldn't make sense. Then it would make sense to continue to obey the principles in the art of war, which is, you know what, we're not going to attack head on. We're going to figure out another way to do it. So, like I said, these are rules, but these are rules like all rules that are meant to be broken when the time calls for it. So, good question, but the art of war answers that question in itself.
Jocko, how do the SEALs reconcile themselves with the fact they face death on every operation they undertake, more so than the conventional forces? Is this something that is learned?
Well, first of all, let me make it perfectly clear that this is not true.
What is it?
Well, first of all, the part that you face death on every operation, there's always a chance. But furthermore, and more importantly, this idea that the SEALs or Special Operations Unit face death more so than conventional forces, not true. In fact, in many cases, SEALs are safer than the conventional forces. The conventional forces are out there doing very difficult operations that are oftentimes more dangerous. I mean, even just something as simple as going on a logistics convoy. In Iraq and Afghanistan, you are extremely exposed in those situations. You're on the defensive because you're in a convoy. You're just waiting to get blown up. And so that situation is you're much more exposed in that situation doing a daytime convoy run down IED'd roads than you would be if you were doing a night patrol through the same area. That's just the way it is. I mean, there's other operations too. I mean, presence patrols and census operations. There's all kinds of operations that the conventional units do that are extremely dangerous. They also oftentimes have less support. So, for instance, there's an aircraft called an AC-130 that is just a miraculous piece of equipment, just an incredible weapon system. And it's an airplane that flies around at 10,000 feet, and it can see everything because it has these incredible imagery systems on it. So they can see everything that's happening. They can track, and then they can shoot and destroy anything they want. So a lot of times the Special Operations Unit will have, for instance, something like an AC-130 supporting them. You know, on top of that, Special Operations, they get really good training. So you've got this outstanding. Now, the conventional forces often have great training as well, but sometimes they don't have the best training in the world. Then you're in a SEAL platoon or you're in a Special Operations, in a Special Forces ODA. You're going to have some good training under your belt that you've been going through for many, many years. So that training makes you safer as well. And you're going to get, oftentimes, again, you're going to get better gear in Special Operations because they have a big budget for a smaller number of people. The logistical support, the flexibility that you have in Special Operations is usually it's usually better. And I mean, like the logistics in the Army or the Marine Corps is awesome. And it definitely is better than special operations. But special operations is usually is always supporting a much smaller unit. So even though the logistics, people, or systems might not be as good, they're overwhelmingly good for the small number of people that are in special operations. So, I'll just go one step further. A lot of times, in Ramadi, the conventional guys, they were living out in the city. They were living out in the city of Ramadi after we put combat outposts in place. We, SEALs, would return to base after a few days out in the field. These guys stayed out there. So we'd return back and, get a shower and get some good food and relax. We had permanent guards that kind of guarded our base with a really big perimeter. So we were in a good spot to stand down for the most part. Whereas the conventional guys, they're out there in Ramadi. They're standing, watch, we go back and can take a break and go on the internet. When they take a break, they're going into a watchtower. So I just want to make sure I make it perfectly clear that, the conventionals are by no means doing anything less risky than the special operations. In fact, most of the time they're doing things that are more risky, tougher missions, higher risk, that's just the way it is. So that's why, we have just the utmost respect and admiration for the conventional units that we work with in Ramadi. And I'll tell you, the guys, that's how we feel. So now the question becomes, how do any service member, face death is the question. And again, it's any service member. Anybody that's going to war has to realize that there's a possibility that they could get killed. And so how do you get over that? For me, it was acceptance and saying to myself, you know what? Okay, I could get killed. And it could happen tonight. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen in a week. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it could happen. And you know what? I'm not afraid of it. So if I'm afraid of it, that's going to be hard to deal with every single day. The other piece of it is you deal with it by mitigating as much risk as you possibly can. Okay, what can we do? How can I make sure that I'm safe? You know how I make sure that I can stay as safe as possible? I train hard. I make sure my guys are training hard. I make sure my guys are dialed in. I make sure that they know what the plan is when we go out on the battlefield. That's what you do. You mitigate as much risk as you can, and then there's areas where you can't mitigate risk.
Yeah.
There's areas where you could you could find an IED, you could find a bullet, you could find a bomb, and that's it. And you can't, in my mind, you can't worry about things that you can't control. So the things that you can't control, accept them, and let's focus on mitigating what we can control. And I think that's what I did when I was in those situations. And I would tell you that that's what most of the guys that I was with had something along those lines in their brains.
Yeah. That acceptance is such a powerful thing. Like if you just accept something like, okay, I'm at risk of this, or I'm this is going to be a terrible, crude example, comparatively speaking.
Compared to what?
Compared to accepting the risk of death.
Let's hear it.
Let's say you messed up.
Is it a long example?
let's say you go to work.
The fans wanted me to say that.
Yeah.
All right, let's say you go to work.
Let's say you go to work, and right when you walk in, one of your coworkers say, "Hey, man, John, your boss is looking for you. He's gonna," and you did something, you messed it up, you blew off some meeting, I don't know, whatever, you messed up with the client. And you're like, "Hey, man, the boss is looking for you," and you're like, so you're gonna avoid the boss at all costs.
Oh, that's gonna make for a long day.
Yeah. So let's say you avoid him one day. The whole day, boom, you clocked out, you're out. Next day, same thing. Oh, shoot, he's looking for you even more. After a while, it's going to weigh on you. And once you just feel like, I'm going to get chewed out, let me just accept it. And then, you can go through with it. Stress is gone.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Analogy accepted.
Yeah. Or like, for example, just kidding.
Thank God.
Well, if like a bully is looking for you,
Yeah,
at school,
go up and get him.
Yeah, like you know. Well, I don't know if you've ever been bullied in school, but like if someone's looking for you, they're mad at you or whatever, and you know they're looking for you, the bully, and you're like, man, you're avoiding them. After a while, you just, all right, I accept it. You know, something's gonna have to go down. I'm gonna have to experience this confrontation.
And really, the acceptance point would be to say, you know what? What's the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen, he beats me up, I get a bloody nose, I don't care anymore.
Right.
I'm going to go get it.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about really is facing the problem, which I also support. You know what? You got a problem, whether it's meeting with your boss or you're going to get bullied, I'm going to face that problem. Yeah. So that's one piece. But one thing that will help you to face the problem is saying, okay, what's the worst thing that happens? Yeah. You know what? I go into my boss, he might fire me. Okay, if he fires me, I'm going to have to go get a new job. But that's the worst thing that's going to happen.
Right.
What's the worst thing that happens if I get in a fight with a bully? Worst thing that happens, I'm going to get a bloody nose. I'm going to get beat up.
Yeah.
But you know what? I can handle that. So I'm going to go face this issue. And it's the same thing in combat. What's the worst thing that happens? Worst thing that happens, I'm going to get killed. Okay, that happens. Yep. It's over. I'm good with it. Let's go out and face it. And, you know, honestly, I said it's the worst thing, but honestly, the thing that guys are usually most afraid of is having their friends get hurt or their guys get hurt. That's the worst thing.
Yeah,
so.
Fully. And then even how you said that the training helps, and that seems obvious, you know, but I think even that is that's like kind of an understated, I think, underappreciated thing. Yeah, because, you know, like remember when USC came out, and I remember looking and being like, bro, these guys are nuts to go in there to do that. But once you learn even just some jujitsu, what you see, like them fighting in the UFC and stuff, like that's...
I could do that.
Yeah. And actually that's one of the reasons why I started jujitsu. I didn't start jujitsu. I wanted to be a fighter. So I trained in MMA first. And before training that, I would have thought you're completely insane to do that. Like you got to be like kind of crazy person. But once you have the training, you see, oh, okay, you know, it kind of just turns on the lights. You see, like, okay, I see all this stuff. And you have just a vast understanding, rather than all you see is knuckles and blood and arms breaking and stuff. All right, next question. Jocko, good evening. In a leadership position, is it okay to take or ask for suggestions on solving a task? Or is it okay to take suggestions that stray from my initial plan?
Yes. Yes. And I hope that would made you decide to ask this question is because you just like found out about the podcast or the book or whatever, because this is something that absolutely anybody that kind of listens would say, yes, absolutely. You're in a leadership position, you should definitely ask for suggestions, take suggestions, share the planning, let many brains be smarter than your one brain. That's what you want. You want to utilize the brain power of your team. Now, the reason you're asking this question, a little bit scary, a little bit of a red flag. The reason you're asking this question is because you're afraid of what it'll look like if you have to ask, hey guys, I'm not sure how to do this, or you're afraid of what it means that you're going to look weak. You're going to look like a weak leader.
Yeah, or inexperienced.
You're inexperienced. That's your insecurity that's making that happen. Don't be insecure. Don't be insecure, because the open mind and the asking for suggestions and the taking suggestions, it actually makes you look like a better leader. I know that sounds crazy. It actually makes you look like a better leader when you say, hey, you know what? Echo, we got this problem to solve. Not 100% sure how to tackle this one. Can you give me a hand? Can you give me some suggestions here? That doesn't make you say, oh, Jocko doesn't know his game. He's an idiot. No, it goes, oh, man, Jocko's humble. He's looking for input. He wants to work together as a team. So, yes, absolutely. Ask for suggestions, take suggestions, have an open mind. Disregard your plan if your plan wasn't good. I'm not just going to hold fast to a plan because I'm the one that thought of it. That's not good leadership at all. Don't do that. Yep. Open your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and asking for suggestions help, and it's kind of what you said already is it helps with making everyone feel even more involved.
Oh, you mean it spreads the ownership throughout the team?
Yes, exactly.
Indeed, Echo Charles.
Yeah, and
yes, indeed.
That improves. I know, as like if you know you're the leader, or whatever, and the leader was asking me for my input. Yeah. And I gave it to him, and when he entered it, man, I would feel just that much more valuable and part of the team. I'd be more enthusiastic now.
Right. Now, who's going to work harder on a project? You, when I come in and say, hey, can you give me a hand? How do you think we should do this? And then you come up with a suggestion, and you start working on that plan. You're going to go a lot harder than if I come in and say, hey, here's what I want you to do.
Yeah.
Follow my instructions.
Yeah.
As soon as you come up to an obstacle, and all I've told you to do is follow my instructions, as soon as you come to an obstacle, you're going to be like, you know what? Hey, this isn't working.
Right.
Whereas if it was your plan, you come up to an obstacle, you tackle that thing. Mm-hmm. You get after it. Yep. That's what happens.
Yep. And, you're saying like sometimes where, as a leader, you might be reluctant to ask for suggestions because you might come off like inexperienced or something like that. If you need a suggestion and you're like, oh, I don't want to sound like that or whatever, and you say, whatever, I'm just going to go ahead and move forward anyway, and not know the best way to do it. Man, you're going to look dumb. And you know how, like, we talked about this before, where if you don't know what you're doing, but you're acting like you know what you're doing, bro, that's transparent, man. You're way more transparent than you think. And that goes pretty much with everything you do. Right. It's like name droppers. When people, like, drop names, they don't really think that people are going to pick up on it, but oh my gosh, you smell that thing from a mile away.
Is that like tonight? I was like, well, Joe
Dean Lister
and me were kicking it.
Exactly. We see what you're doing.
Hey, it's been 26 podcasts and I haven't done much name dropping. JT, Joe, you're the first one. Name dropping.
You should say Joel Tudor because you could be talking about JT Torres.
Oh no, I'm talking about Joel
another
Tudor.
jiu-jitsu guy.
And I guess I dropped Jeffy Glover's name. But those guys, we dropped Greg Train's name, too. You know what I mean? We drop everybody. Like, everybody that we train with, we drop their names, but just no one knows who they are.
Right. Yes. That's
like Andy or Big Eric. I mean, we talk about these guys.
Well, technically, that wouldn't be name dropping, though. Technically, like name dropping. Then again.
But what if I said, "Hey, I was training with Big Eric tonight, and he did such and such"?
Yeah. See, if it's
but I actually was training with Dean Lister tonight.
Well, yeah, it depends on the context you're trying to add. If you're trying to add into the story the fact that I know this guy, that therefore it makes me hip or cool, like this guy, or on his level, whatever, or associated with him, so I'm cool, whatever, that's name dropping. But if you're just trying to paint a more accurate picture of your experience or your story or whatever.
But the fact of the matter is, like, I was training with Dean tonight.
Right.
Yeah,
see, so it added context to the story, but how you said Dean and then you kind of reversed and came back to and said, Dean Lister. That's name dropping. Nonetheless, the point is, if you start carrying on, you don't know the answer. You need suggestions, and you say, whatever, I'm just going to move forward. Bro, they're going to smell that on you, that you're whack like that.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of name dropping right now.
It's true. That the point there is you're a lot more transparent than you think. Like a lot of people, and some people that
what's funny? You keep using transparent in its the way that the business community uses transparent right now. They use it in a positive way. Yeah. Like, hey, look, we're just going to be completely transparent on how we're doing this. Yeah. You're using it in a little bit of a negative way. Right. Like, hey, I can see through your crap here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I tend to use it in both. Like I try to make
use it in both.
Bipartisan kind of thing.
Bipartisan, I like that.
I read that, learned it. Actually, I got it from Seinfeld, but nonetheless, they'll see right through that if you need suggestions, and that's on top to add to the fact that all this other stuff that it makes the team feel more valuable. It's a better overall way to be.
There's no doubt about it. No doubt. But by the way, in case you're wondering, the best military planning units, whether it's the SEAL teams, or whether it's the Army that I work with, or whether it's the Marine Corps, the more open they are in their planning, taking suggestions from throughout the chain of command, the better off they do. Period. End of story. I should have just answered with that, and we could have moved on. That's the way it works.
Next question. This is a question / clarification. Could you elaborate on flanking? My impression was that it meant to move around to attack from the side instead of head on. But as often as it comes up on your podcast, I get the impression there must be more to it, or at least some interesting nuances.
I guess there's not that much more to it. I mean, a little piece of it was you want to distract them a little bit to the front, and then you want to flank them. That's about the only additional information that's needed to understand what flank is. Flank is, yes, you attack, you instead of attacking head on, you attack from the side or sometimes the rear. And I'll tell you, just to point this out for anyone out there that's either in the military or in law enforcement, and you're going to flank and you're going to go to the rear, just remember that on a large scale it works because you have distance where your weaponry won't impact friendly lines. But if you surround someone or you come from the rear of a, let's say, a small target building or a situation in a open environment, but you're surrounding an enemy, just don't forget that when you surround an enemy, now you're cutting off your own fields of fire. So that's why you shouldn't do that. You should just stick with the flank, where that way you can still keep shooting and keep your fields of fire as open as possible. I just wanted to throw that in there. But that's what it is. Military terms, it means, you're attacking the sides. You're attacking the weak point, which is generally the sides. Now, it's the same thing, obviously, in jiu-jitsu. You don't attack what they're defending. You attack their neck, attack their neck, attack their neck. They forget about their neck, and boom, you flank them and get their arm. Greg Train said that to me tonight. He was like, "Oh, that was a little flank," he says to me. Greg Train. So, did I just name drop? What if I said Dean Lister said it, that it would be a name drop?
If you said Greg Train told me that today while I was hanging out with Dean Lister, that would have been a name drop.
All right, I won't do that. Okay. So, but then now you get flank, and we've talked about this before. When you're talking about dealing with people, then yes, you don't want to attack where people are dug in. You don't want to attack what they are defending. When someone has a strong point of view that they're married to, don't attack that. If someone has a big giant ego, don't attack that. Flank it. Maybe even just give a little bit of massage to that ego to distract them. And then sneak in from the flank with your idea and you put it in there. If someone's got a plan that they're defending hardcore, don't attack the plan. Come up with a little way to augment the plan, a little twist on the plan that they already have. So you're accepting their plan, but you're putting your spin on it. And that way, they accept it because it's part of their plan. So it works. So once again, don't beat your head against a wall 47 times. Just flank. Real simple. That's all it is.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times it's a figurative thing.
Yeah, obviously. And there's like all these little sayings. He who flanks first wins. And flank or be flanked. There's one more. There's a million of them. But when in doubt, flank. Yeah, there's all these little things. But the great thing about it is also just mentally, okay? If we're trying to solve a problem and we're just thinking one way of the problem, when you get stuck in that way, flank. When you come up to an obstacle, flank. Yeah. When you get a resistance and you can't figure something out, flank. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Just always have that in your head. Yeah. I'm always doing that. Emotionally dealing with relationship scenarios. You got your relationship, your wife, she's dug in on something. Don't attack that thing. Flank.
Is that kind of like you want to go to train jiu-jitsu, but you'd gone like a bunch of... No. You want to go to Taco Tuesday or something. I don't know, wherever you go. And it's her birthday. Well,
I go to Steak Saturday.
Steak Saturday. So you buy your wife flowers the day or 2 days before, right?
Yeah.
Instead of being like, I'm the man, I'm going because I said so. You buy her the flowers.
You flank them.
And then when that day comes, you have the quote unquote opportunity to see some friends. Just a quick one night. She'll remember those flowers because she's on the the distraction, so to speak.
You distract her.
You flank her with it, or like on Jurassic Park. The raptors. You ever seen Jurassic Park?
I have. It was quite some time ago.
So
it was about dinosaurs.
Yeah. So the T-Rex,
living ones.
The T-Rex can't really see you that good. So you just remain still. If you remain real still, he can't really see you because he sees movement. But the raptors, they're these they're little mini T-Rexes.
They flank though, don't they?
They flank. So one of them's like messing with you, like engaging you, and you think, okay, I'm not gonna move, or maybe I'll move or whatever.
Boom.
And then the other two get you, and then they enjoy you as their meal. That's a flank. It's a prehistoric
When in doubt,
flank.
Get that mindset. It's a good mindset to have.
I think you're right.
The flank.
Next question. At what point do you turn off the manipulation tactics with people that you work with? Or don't you?
So this question, I actually pulled this from a friend of mine. Not someone I've known for a long time, but someone that's a guy that I know. He doesn't know me well enough, but he knows well enough to ask me this question.
Sure.
Right? And he actually sent me a text. He's like, I've been thinking after listening to your podcast, are you just manipulating people all the time?
Yeah.
And it's a legit question, right?
I have that question, sure.
Yeah, even Echo has that question. So I obviously have talked about leadership and influence as manipulation because that's what they are, right? If I'm trying to get you to do something, you could say I'm leading you, but you could also say I'm manipulating you, okay? Right. And the difference to me, and I've pointed out this difference before, the difference to me is that if I'm trying to do something that's going to benefit you or benefit the team, then that's leadership or that's influence. If I'm trying to get you to do something and it's going to benefit me, then that's manipulation. I've talked about that before. So, that being said, I am not running around in full manipulation mode all the time. I'm not. I'm not constantly sitting there trying to plot and make people do things. I will say this, though. I am generally conscious or aware or detached enough that I can see my interactions with other people from a good enough distance to see how I'm affecting the situation. So it's there. I'm aware of it. I do have a couple friends, not many, where I'm just like completely unfiltered. Some of the times, some maybe even most of the time. But with most people, like I said, I'm at least aware of what I'm saying and what I'm doing and how it's being received. It's modulated, though. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not sitting there manipulating everyone that I meet. And the fact of the matter is, the reason is, most of the time, I don't care. Not that I don't care about them, but I have no reason. I am not trying to do something with this person. I'm just interacting with the person, and I like to interact with different people, and I get along well with a lot of different types of people, from straight-laced, like religious people to freaking outlaw bikers, to surfers, to alcoholics, to fitness freaks. I mean, I'm friends with a bunch of different people, and I'm definitely not sitting around trying to manipulate them. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to enjoy, and I enjoy the various personalities and sort of decisions and lives that people had. I learn from them. I'm not trying to manipulate them. I'm actually trying to learn from people most of the time, not manipulate. But, when I do get in a team setting or a business setting or a relationship setting where now what we're doing is an interaction of humans, then I definitely will be thinking about how my actions and reactions are affecting the situation. And I will tell you this. I'm generally only doing it for good.
Right.
I'm not trying to get things from people. I think you would be one to say, like, yeah, I'm pretty generous with what I'm trying to do with my life and with helping people. Not that I find myself to be like some healer or some benevolent person that's running around. I'm not trying to say that, but I'm generally, when if I'm interacting with someone enough that I'm in this mode, I am trying to help them.
Right.
I'm trying to help us. That's what I'm trying to do. So if this is manipulation to try and help people and trying to help whatever it is I'm doing with other people to move in the right direction, if that's manipulation, I'm guilty.
Right. Yeah, and you kind of mentioned that too, where you're using the word manipulation, kind of.
Yeah, I use it where most people don't like to say it.
Right. Right.
Most people say, you know what, I really like to influence my friends and move them in the right direction.
Yeah.
Well, what is that doing?
Yes.
That's manipulating.
Yeah. So if you look up the definition, it's to handle cunningly. That's what manipulation is.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, there's another definition in there too, but I think that's a more general, broad.
Yeah, but I think the generally accepted meaning of the word manipulate has a negative connotation for sure, and it is rightfully so, because it generally, when you say it, you're talking about, oh, Jocko is really manipulating Echo. Right. So what does that mean? Oh, Jocko's trying to get stuff from Echo. He's trying to do stuff for his own benefit. Yeah. Whereas if I were to say, you know, Jocko, he's been hanging out with Echo a lot, man, he's really having a good influence on him. Yeah. Well, guess what? That's cool. Oh, everyone's happy now. But what did I really do? I really manipulated you.
Right.
I really made you act a certain way. I led you. I manipulated you.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, maybe I need to stop using the word manipulation. But the reason I like to use it, because I know it makes people think. Yeah. I know it makes people see leadership for what it is. With leadership, you're trying to get other human beings to do what you want them to do. Yeah. That's what you're trying to do. Now, in the best form of leadership, you're trying to get them to want to do what you want them to do. And an even better form of leadership, you're trying to get them to do what they want to do, and it happens to be what you want them to be too, to do too.
Collectively, sure. Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
But all of those means I'm trying to get you to do something.
Yeah.
And whether we want to call it leadership, or we want to call it influence, or we want to call it inspiration, or we want to call it manipulation, it's the same thing. The only difference being, in my mind, when I manipulate something, I'm trying to help myself. And I don't do that.
Right.
I'm not trying to help myself.
Yeah, manipulate
through other people.
Yeah, it sounds like that it's helping yourself at their expense. You know?
Exactly.
Like that's manipulation. And influence is even more broad. I think even goes outside of manipulation. Just because influence, you can passively influence someone. You can just hang around.
But you can passively manipulate people too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you can. You can absolutely passively manipulate people.
Like and not know you're doing it?
Well, no. You can do it by not doing something.
Oh, yeah. That's like passive aggressive manipulation.
Sure. Yes.
But like influence, let's say we're just cruising and we're hanging out. You're not telling me or asking me or whatever to do something. You're just being you, and I'm like, fuck, Jocko's so cool, man. Let me roll up my sleeves like Jocko does. You know, that's influence. Like influence. Yeah. I wouldn't call that manipulation. That wouldn't be manipulation.
Yeah, but what if I intentionally was like, you know what? I really need to get Echo to do X.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna show him. I'm gonna lead.
Yeah. So and really isn't. So that being said, isn't being polite? Isn't that a low form of manipulation?
Absolutely.
Like if I say, hey, would it be possible for you to grab that chair from me? What do you mean? Would it be possible? We know that's possible.
Yes,
I'm an adult. We know it's possible. I know what possible means. Why did you say if possible? Why did I say that? Because I want you to
feel good
not
about
be
it.
defensive.
Yeah.
You want to feel good. You want to feel. That's like low levels of manipulation.
It absolutely is. It's interacting with other people.
Right. So you have to show some form of. If we want to use the word manipulation, which we do, obviously, you're always doing it. So in a way, it's pretty rare you're going to turn it off.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, really. And so I guess to answer the question once again, do I ever turn it off? Not really. Am I walking around trying to manipulate people and get them to fall under my spell of destruction? Hell no. I'm just a normal guy that's interacting with people on a regular way. And when I'm dealing with people in an interactive situation, I'm aware of the way I'm acting and how it affects the situation. That's it.
And you happen to be pretty effective. In a positive way, though, how you turned out, like if it's for the goal of the collective.
Right.
It's not a malevolent.
Yes, it is not. All right.
So really the answer to the question is not really. That's the question. Yeah, that's really the question. Right?
I like the way you put that.
All right. We got what? One more.
Yeah, we got time for one more.
Jocko, how do you stay motivated? And how do you motivate people when they start to slack?
Now, motivation it's kind of a strange word because it doesn't really mean what we think it means. We think it means that we're fired up to do something. We think that it means we're eager and passionate to make something happen. And we think that somehow we should just be able to turn on that eagerness and turn on that passion. But we can't. Because you just can't turn on passion. You can't just turn on the desire to execute a task. It just doesn't work that way. And honestly, that isn't even what motivate means. Motivate doesn't mean to yell and scream and encourage. No. To motivate actually means to provide a motive, a reason why. So to motivate someone is to explain to them why they're doing what they're doing, how it will help them, where it'll take them, why they should continue to work and to struggle and to fight. And when you need motivation yourself, don't look for someone to scream and yell. Don't look for someone else to give you motivation. Look at yourself. Look at yourself and remind yourself why. Why you are doing what you are doing. Remind yourself that this struggle, this temporary pain, this fight that you're in, this is what will make you stronger and faster and smarter and better. And then, with that motivation, go forward into the fray, into the storm, into the heat of the battle, where victory is forged. And I think that's all I've got for tonight. So thanks to everyone for listening and supporting. And if you want to continue this conversation or ask questions or give us feedback, you can find us out on the interwebs. On Twitter, Echo Charles is Echo Charles. And I am at Jocko Willink. We're also out there on the Facebook and even Instagram.
It's true.
And thanks to everybody that makes this podcast happen. And who is that, Echo?
Aside from you, Onnit, of course. And if you've been living under a rock, as they say, and don't know what Onnit is, it's where we get Alpha Brain, which helps you think and memorize stuff and whatnot. It's nutrients for your brain. Anyway, was it Jody saying that he takes Shroom Tech?
Yes, I think it was.
It was the Cake Nuts. I think I already said this. He was texting me. He said, I want that Shroom Tech
Okay.
back. He said, I guess he used it. It was dope.
Cake nuts. Getting the Shroom Tech on.
High intensity stuff for a long period of time. Anyway, Onnit is the supplement company. So you go to onnit.com/Jocko and you get 10% off all supplements. That's the only ones I would recommend, really.
Well, yeah.
And I've tried some other ones before. Anyway, and then before you do Amazon shopping, if you want to click through the link on jockopodcast.com, you can support that way.
Or jockostore.com.
Right, or jockostore.com.
And speaking of Jocko Store.
Yeah. Before you shop on Amazon, if you go through Jocko Store, you can shop on Jocko Store. If you like the shirt, we have shirts. We have a new one out too. But yeah, if you think those are cool shirts, get one of those.
The new one out's Know the Darkness.
Know the Darkness.
See, no one's even going to know what these things mean. Unless you're one of us,
right?
You're not going to know. People are just going to be asking you, what are you doing? Why are you wearing that? I can barely read it. You say, don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I'll say this, where I don't know if I told you this before, but like the ideas behind the shirts, they're not just like random, ooh, that looks cool on a shirt or whatever. They do have like inside meaning, like discipline equals freedom, right? So that was your thing, like originally before you even started podcast. You were like, when you said that, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And that's what you said. You said at first it doesn't make any sense, and I was like, yeah, it doesn't make. Thinking in my head doesn't. But then when you explained it, I was like, dang, that's kind of. That's deep.
It does make sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It makes perfect sense, actually.
Indeed.
But it is one of those things, that's kind of weird. So, okay, so that makes sense. If you don't know what it means, all it is yet another shirt with a little saying on it. That's all it is, if you don't know what it means. Same thing with your head that says good, and the good is backwards.
Right.
All these shirts are for you. They're not for like, hey, everyone, look at my cool shirt. Even though it can have that effect, but that's not what they're made for you.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So when you're looking in the mirror, it says good. Then you can read it. It's backwards. So the darkness shirt, if you look at it, it's black on a black shirt. You can barely see it, but that's what darkness is, man. You can barely see it, but you know that darkness.
But it's there.
Look at the design on the back.
Know it.
Yeah, if you look at the design on the back, we'll just say it's a dark scene. Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna say that, but it's black on black, so you can't. Unless you kind of know and you really look at it, if the shirt means something to you, then it's going to mean something.
So you're making shirts that actually, you got to be one of us.
Yeah, you got to be on the inside,
Yeah,
it'll have that extra layer.
To know what's up.
But hey, man, if you just think it just looks cool, hey, do you, man. Do it. Anyway, there you go. That's how you can support if you want.
Awesome. So that's everyone that makes the podcast happen, and the actual people that make the podcast happen is you all listening to this podcast. You're the ones that make it happen, that ask the questions, that write reviews, that give us feedback and let us know that you're getting something out of it. Mm-hmm. So thank you for listening and for going out into your part of the world and motivating yourself and those around you to get up and get after it. And until next time, this is Jocko and Echo. Out.